Hey guys, let's use a pricing software to maximize your revenue on Airbnb. I'm going to teach you how to use Pricelabs, Guesty Price Optimizer, and the Airbnb multi-calendar to bring in all of that data and automate changes that will make you a ton of money. Going multi-channel and having a pricing software are the two things you need to do in 2026. And I promise you, this video will give you some results. Let's begin. Now you can grab your laptop and follow along, and this will work on any software because every software runs on either one of two different types of logic. I'm going to teach you both in this video. First, we're going to set up two types of automations that you need to have set up before you turn on a pricing software. Then after that, I'm going to teach you how to pull insights from the different platforms so that way you can make better decisions through your software. And third, I'm going to teach you the most important part of having a pricing software in the first place. And this is where most hosts just tend to go off the rails. Like a student of mine a couple days ago, we had to recreate his whole pricing strategy because he made one big, fast mistake. So grab your laptop. Let's begin. Look at this. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, something you need to know is I use Pricelabs and Guesty, both. I use Guesty's GPO to automate all my prices, but I additionally use Pricelabs because both of them have strengths in the way that they visualize data and give us insights so we can make the right changes. This video is also sponsored by Guesty, by the way, and you're going to find out why by the end of this video. First, I want to teach you how to automate your length of stay settings based on how far into the future your booking window is. Last minute bookings, we want shorter minimum length of stays. We're going to start with Pricelabs. Pricelabs and Guesty are completely different in their approaches. Like I said, two different logics. Pricelabs logic uses greater than or less than logic. It's very intuitive if you use Airbnb. Think last minute discounts or early bird discounts. If you've ever set these, it makes perfect sense. So first what we do, if you look at this screenshot, we're going to set a default minimum length of stay for both the weekdays and the weekends. And then what we're going to do in our case is we are going to slowly lower those minimums as time gets closer to today. We're only going to use the last minute adjustments because we're taking a reductive approach, just like my past videos would teach you to do. It's easier just to do everything in one direction, so let's start with our maxes and slowly reduce them over time. But my friends, warning, there is a software setting at the bottom of this that you should not use. It's like a master override. It says, under no condition can your minimums go below what you set here at the bottom, which means even if you just select a couple dates and you go, I want these days to be 1 day minimums, if it disagrees with the setting at the very bottom, it will ignore those changes. I don't like this at all. You'll only ever use this if you have a very grouchy co-host client. But aside from this, avoid it. One more setting you do need to know that we love to use is this orphan day logic. So you can have a 3-day minimum on a weekend, but let's say there's a checkout on a Friday and then Friday gets abandoned and somebody checks in on Saturday. You can then use a 1-day gap override because of the orphan day settings in the software. Take the screenshot I'm showing you now and just copy these settings. I think these are pretty juicy, pretty good. And you're going to notice with these settings, I'm also using a less than logic as well. Because a gap that's 30 days out, I might be more strict with than a gap that's only 13 days out. As we have less time, we have less confidence, which is something we're going to cover in our next setting change as well. But Guesty, completely different beast. Guesty is full of some really smart programmers, and I think they're giving us a lot of trust. They really believe in us to be smart too. They're using the number 0 like it's going out of style. And if you've never done any programming, this is what really can trip you up. It's not intuitive at all. Guesty, instead of greater or less than logic, they use override in ranges logic. I made that up, but it's the only way to describe this simply. So for sections of time, we're going to override our default settings instead of using Pricelabs greater than or less than. So let's put up this screenshot. It's my best friend Sean, by the way.
Hi guys.
He also does Airbnb.
I do.
And she's a professional blackjack player. Can I say that publicly?
You can. Sharp Cookie.
Okay. Yeah, she's got a YouTube channel, Sharp Cookie. How about that? Oh yeah, back to the screenshot. Oops. Good morning. And this screenshot right here. And this is what I love about Guesty GPO. First, we can define the length of stay minimum per day. And this is special because some markets, Thursdays are big or Sundays are big. And we want to make sure that we don't get a Tuesday stay for maybe Wednesday, Thursday, because all of our check-ins are Thursday, and that could screw up our weekends. So this type of granularity is great. But then here's where the unintuitiveness comes in. If we want to change these, we're going to start with the number 0. We're going to open up our settings down below, and we're going to make a rule that says from 0 days until 10, 12, 13 days.
that we will allow a 1-day minimum for both weekends and weekdays at the very shortest. We'll need to make 2 separate rules now, starting at 13 days, where let's say we want the weekdays to stay 1, but we want the weekends to go up to 2. So from 13 to 40 days, the weekends stay 1, but then we make another rule from 13 to 40 days, the weekends are 2. And you can do this on an exact day basis. So we can just up and down Thursdays and just make Thursdays behave like a weekday now instead of a weekend. It gets really, really deep. But the concept here is we are overriding chunks of time starting at 0. And at the point that we get back to our basics, where let's say 2 days for weekdays and 3 days for weekends is our minimums, and we want that to be effective 75 days or further into the future, then the last rule that we would write is from 41 days to 75 days, we're allowing a 2-day minimum on both weekends and weekdays. I know this is a lot of math. It's weird. You can just copy my screenshots if you use Guesty GPO, and this is how we do it. And the only thing that you would then change for these rules is the days that you want them to start and end. And the reason why we have to be this specific with Guesty GPO is that if you have 2 rules that exist and they overlap, it will opt to the longer rule. So we can't make 2 rules that accidentally overlap each other. Otherwise, it's all for naught. Even though this ranges logic type of approach is really painful to learn, it's really powerful, and it comes through in spades in the next setting that we're going to adjust, which is adjusting last-minute discounts. Teaching you how to change your last-minute discounts on Pricelabs is exactly like doing it on Airbnb. They use a less than logic. Less than 60 days, change the price. Less than 40 days, change the price. But because Guesty GPO uses ranges instead, you can go down and then go back up, which no one else can do. This is super powerful. And let me tell you a story about a woman who has drug addicts at her property, and this is how we solved her problem. North of San Francisco, one of my students and someone I do pricing for at Helm, we had to fix a pricing issue, which is that if she goes below $150 a night, she will get drug addicts. And of course, she doesn't want that. And her property isn't the most attractive because it's an upstairs apartment attached to a house. It's not the world's most fun property, so it doesn't get a lot of bookings on its own. She'll have to fight on price a lot of the times. So we used this setting, which is where we started with her standard price, and in about 45 days, we dropped her rate 30%. So whatever Guesty GPO's standard rates were, to get her good prices in peak season and holidays and events and etc., anything that slipped through that 45-day mark would automatically get dropped 30%. Now she's competing on price. And this often will take her below $150, especially in slower seasons where rates are already suppressed. Then from 45 days into about 20 days, her prices are affordable, which can get her the bookings that she needs. But because the rates are only suppressed more than 20 days away, a drug addict or a vagrant will not give up that money 20 days in advance. These types of people tend to only book 2 or 3 days in advance. So at the 20-day mark, we slowly raise her rates back up to normal again. And by the time 1 week rolls around, her prices are basically back to normal again. This creates a valley shape in our pricing strategy, allowing us to safely compete on price and then reversing it when it's no longer safe. And this is effective for houses. If any of you have a big 5-bedroom house and you would prefer to get a whole home booking instead of doing a split strategy, then you can design your price to drop rates at 2 or 3 weeks out, but then come back up 1 week in advance to prevent parties. At this point, I would advise if you have a house to use my split strategy to finish filling your home. That's in a different video. And one further caveat before we move forward is every house, every market, every property is different. So the way that we drop our rates last minute, whether we drop them 10% or 55% over time, it is really dependent on your property. So many factors: how many people you can hold base versus how many people will tend to book last minute, how much of your competition is getting booked versus last minute, how many of them get left behind with their 4-day minimums when you finally drop to 1 or 2, if your traveler archetype changes between somebody who books 8 weeks in advance or only 2 weeks in advance. All of these variables are ones that you need to know and are things often that a pricing software cannot tell you. So you will have to know your market and know your property to make these adjustments, or at least for them to go well.
Next, let's look at the insights that you can get from both of these softwares. The reason why I love connecting my listings to Pricelabs, even if I don't pay them to automate my settings, is because of the way that they visualize data. They understand that not everybody's a math person, that some people need shapes and colors to guide them. So in their calendar, they have 4 colors, from light green to dark green to light blue to dark blue, that can be set to track strength or momentum in a market. One option is to look at prices versus last year, but my favorite is to look at demand. And here's one of my secrets that you can use. Look at this screenshot. You'll notice that there are a run of dark blue squares, which is the highest demand. And then you'll see a strike through these boxes, which is a purple line that indicates that I increased the minimum length of stay for a booking. If you have a run of 5 or 6 days that are hyper high demand, and then someone booked a 2-day stay in the middle, it makes the rest of those dark blue days harder to get a booking. What we want to do whenever there is a season of high demand, 5 days or 6 days in a row, we want a 4-day or 5-day stay, if at all possible, because that means that we will make the most total ADR and occupancy for these days. One of the things that we've preached for years on this channel is the moment that you have a booking, the days immediately before or immediately after a reservation become hard to book. Because if you have a checkout on a Thursday, the only way Thursday can get booked is with a Thursday check-in, which means you can't get a 4-day stay that includes a Tuesday check-in because Tuesday and Wednesday are taken. And herein lies the secret. If you have 5 strong days in a row, don't allow a 2-day stay. At least not initially. Go for the gold. And even if you're not the first booked, as your competitors get booked and they become unavailable, you might be one of the only listings available with all 5 days. And if you can stop and meditate on this, what I just said, calendar, availability, preservation in times of high demand, where all of your other competitors get booked for 2 or 3 days, but somebody needs all 6, you're the only one with all 6 available. Even though there's 300 listings in your market with some days still available, you might just be one of 20. And because you're only one of 20, you can jack your rates way, way up. Take that to the bank. And beyond the calendar, which is my favorite Pricelabs little widget, is the neighborhood data. It can show you the percentile groups of your competitors, which is customizable so that way it's accurate to your specific listing. Right now, when we see it like this, it's broad market data. So we can't take it all the way to the bank, but we still can see market changes in your neighborhood. And below that is an occupancy chart. And what I love about this is the green line that you see in the screenshot, that is a momentum indicator. It's like stock trading. If there's 10% of a market booked, but 5% of that booked in the last 7 days, that's a lot of momentum. So we like to look where the red and green lines come closer together, which means that there's a lot of interest for these dates. Now, Pricelabs and Guesty Price Optimizer have built into their algorithms to track this type of temporality, is what we could call it, to increase your rates when things look like they're in high demand. But it's also awesome for you to see this data just in case you think or speculate, like me, that these softwares aren't always completely accurate. Seeing this data gives me extra context, which allows me to go back into Guesty Price Optimizer and make some changes like length of stay minimums or increasing my prices for a season of the weekend, etc. But now let's go to Guesty Price Optimizer. They give us a chart that Pricelabs doesn't give us. They give us a recommended pricing overlay for the whole future year, and they give that to us in a blue line. I do something called clipping, which is something I teach in private. That's what creates that gray lower bar. And anytime the Guesty Price Optimizer disagrees with my prices, where I've clipped them at $110, that little blue jagged line goes below the rates that I've clipped. And depending on how low that clip is and how often that clip happens, I will adjust my length of stay settings. I'll do this using rule sets on Airbnb, and in certain seasons of low demand and heavy clipping, I will change my pricing strategy altogether, because what it says is that Guesty Price Optimizer and we disagree on strategy, so we should come to a compromise. And I build compromise into my systems. But my friends, what is most important to take away in this chapter of the video, we are using insights to be able to make manual decisions that disagree with or override our softwares. Our softwares will not do everything for us, and they will not always capture value. Like I just alluded to, length of stay discounts are part of our greater strategy. But Guesty Price Optimizer and Pricelabs do not build their price recommendations for the possibility that you want a 4-day stay, or a 2-day stay or a 10-day stay. They are giving you day-by-day rates based on factors like supply, demand, and momentum, but on a per-day basis. They are optimizing to the day. Whenever you use length of stay discounts, you are invoking something that we call game theory. You're saying, I don't want a 1-day stay, so I will be uncompetitive for the 1 days. But I want a 14-day stay, so I'm going to come down on price and focus on occupancy over ADR. That's also a long conversation. The pro tip for this chapter is plug into softwares for free. You are giving them your data. That's why this is mutually beneficial. And then you get feedback and insights on this data. Wheelhouse and Pricelabs may disagree on things, and you'd love to know where they disagree. Now, the only caveat here is Guesty Price Optimizer is not going to let you plug in for free and take advantage of their data. You have to be part of Guesty to access Guesty Price Optimizer. And so I will conclude that maybe that's why it's best to use Guesty's Price Optimizer as the paid one because it's mandatory, and then access the other ones for free. This will give you the most broad data that you can get, and thus you can get the most insights and most actionability. Like I said, this video totally sponsored by Guesty, and there's a link down below, and you can get 10% off of Guesty with that link as well, not just my free course on how to use GPO. And before we get to the final chapter, the big thing that everybody makes a huge mistake on, I do want to give a nod to some of Guesty Price Optimizer's other functions. They have a group settings section where you can create override categories, and you can hack this by adding tags to your listings. So let's say you're a manager with 500 listings in 14 different cities, and you want some of your inventory that's very unique. Maybe they're all 2-bedroom properties that are ADA accessible in all of your cities, but you can't really weigh it down to just 2 bedrooms, and you can't really weigh it down to just a city. So you create a tag called 2B ADA, 2-bedroom ADA. Or you create a tag for bachelorette parties, BP for bachelorette party. And any listing that you onboard, as you grow from 500 to 5,000, as you create the listings, you just add BP or 2B ADA. And now, as those listings get pulled in, when you turn Guesty Price Optimizer on, it's going to take all of these group settings that you've previously created and impose them to your listings. You can build entire pricing strategies for apartments, for houses on the water, for tree houses, for 2 beds, for ADA accessible, for event markets, and you can build them all into group settings that are all conditional to tags. And then every listing you create, you just tag it appropriately, and it will fall in line into a greater pricing strategy. This is 1, a time saver. And 2, if you need to pivot all of your inventory, you need to change the pricing strategy for 400 units that all have something in common, you can change the group setting that affects the tag, and all of the tagged listings then change the pricing strategy. This is, again, a genius move by Guesty. Guesty's Price Optimizer team, for all of their over nerdiness, insisting on using ranges and zeros, this is the stuff you just really can't get anywhere else. This is real pricing magic. And for everything else that I love about Guesty's Price Optimizer, you're going to have to see it in that course I'm making for everybody who joins Guesty with my link. Soft nudge. And lastly, let's talk about the one mistake that everybody's making in a big way. Another one of my students that I coached yesterday, he uses Pricelabs. And he asked me to go into his Pricelabs and review his settings and teach him some settings and make some changes. What I saw, this will blow your mind, is that all of his bookings were within $10 of Pricelabs recommendations, which you'll see in gray bar number 1 right now in this photo that I'm giving you. But then he had customization in a heavy, heavy way that would slash his rates by 40 to 60%. And those rate slashes created a price that he would not want to get a booking at, knowing that he already got a booking at, say, $250, and Pricelabs agreed with that. To try to simplify what I'm saying, he had 3 or 4 bookings that if he made no customizations, the booking price and Pricelabs agreed. But then he had some bookings at 40 to 60% less money than Pricelabs would have wanted him to have. But his overrides were what was dropping the price. So I went in and I slashed all of his customizations. I said, we're going to go with what Pricelabs is saying, because Pricelabs is always within $10 of the price that you're getting, and everything else that you're doing just seems to be messing with your bottom line. You keep cutting rates unnecessarily. So instead, let's move your price drops outside of Pricelabs, so that way when Pricelabs fails, you'll impose a second strategy, a level 2 strategy, to pick up the slack where Pricelabs is failing. And this is something that I do with Guesty Price Optimizer as well. Wherever Guesty is failing, I put in a level 2 strategy. But before we get to how to do that, I want to really drive home the point I'm trying to make.
which is that hosts see the software and think that the software isn't smart enough, so they add all these customizations. I want more money on the weekends. I want you to be more aggressive on holidays. I want you to be more aggressive with last-minute strategy. I want you to ignore low demand signals, etc. And they add 5 or 6 changes right away. They haven't even learned how to use Pricelabs or Guesty Optimizer or Wheelhouse or anything, and they immediately add their sauce on top of something that they don't understand how to use yet. And now their prices are all wrong. And you know what they do to try to fix that? When they're not getting bookings, they go to base rate, and then they increase or decrease their base rate in order to get results, but they're leaving all of these really stupid settings. And I know this is really, really nerdy, so I'm going to tell you a math-based story. The correct answer for a question on a test is 50. And the teacher wants you to show your work on how you got to 50. And the question is, what is 250 divided by 10 times 2? And so you show your math. Very clean order of operations, you get to 50. But what these hosts are doing is they're saying, well, 250 is 1/3 of 750. And so we have to multiply it by 3. And then we're going to divide it by 10, which is 75. But that is $15 more than 60. So we're going to now subtract $15. And then we're going to divide that by 2, which gets us to 30. And that is 20 less than 50, so we're going to add 20. And they go all this roundabout way to get to 50. Now, let's say we change a variable in the system. All those extra steps to get to 50, everything goes crazy. So changing the base rate to go on this wandering path to get to the final right answer is the wrong way to solve your problem. I hope that made sense, because I don't think I'm smart enough to say it in any way that's more simple. So you're trying to get to 50, you raise your base rate, you finally get the right output, you get a booking. And you think that you did the right thing by changing your base rate. But what you should have done is erased all the extra sauce that you put in first. You see, step 1 is simply turn the machine on and find out the base rate that gets you bookings on the weekends, that gets you consistent bookings on the weekends. Then we make an adjustment on your weekdays to try to get you bookings on the weekdays too. Then step 3, we try to identify if maybe we're not getting any bookings really last minute, or we're not getting any bookings far future. We need to identify if Pricelabs or GPO is only working in zones. And then we start making adjustments per zone to optimize per zone. And that's where you can start using the sauce. We're calibrating ranges. And that's why I love Guesty's Price Optimizer so much, is because by the time we get to this step, we need a software that works in ranges. And to simplify the moral of the story, for you to get the right price, your software has to have 2 things. It has to have the right base rate, and it has to have the right equations or algorithm to get to the right output. If you have the right base rate, but the wrong algorithm, you'll always be wrong. If you have the right algorithm and the wrong base rate, you'll always be wrong. Sometimes you'll be too cheap and you'll get a booking and you think that you're right. But that's not how this game works. We need to be more decisive, and we need to be more careful. And we need to build from the ground up. We start with the basics, and then we add the sexy stuff on the back end. I know a lot of you are smart, and you want really sexy technology to do really crazy things. But a lot of times, this industry isn't that hard. So I encourage you to take it back to the basics, breathe, take a walk in nature, enjoy yourself, and watch the basic stuff work and say, hey, you know what? Okay, it's not smart enough right here. Let's fix that. Now, as I leave you to go to the Grand Canyon, I invite you to join Guesty and join my team at Cracking Super Roast. I will teach you to get all the bookings at the best prices. I'll teach you how to have the best listings and the best teams and the best automation and maybe the coolest life. You can automate and travel the world like I do. I promise you're gonna love it, or you're gonna get really bored and you're gonna get back in your business, which is also a good problem to have. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end. I appreciate it. Let me remind you of the Guesty link down below. And here's another video on pricing strategy best practices that will help round out some of the concepts in this video. And as always, my friends, I'll see you on the other side.